one from John Landau that corresponds with this Discovering Buddhism course, Introduction to Tantra. I've adapted it slightly. The reason is we're finding that, and based in this time and age, we need to be a little bit more sensitive to racial and gender sensitivity and things. And so what I've noticed is the Tibetans are considered, I would consider them perhaps in my world as people of color, possibly as Asians, maybe you could say. It really depends on what culture you're living in. So from ancient days, a lot of their terminology, not through any fault of their own, but was based on if you're doing visualizations, like Vajrasattva, and many of the visualizations involve light, rays of light. And they often have like Tonglen meditation, all the good is white light coming into you. So you're breathing in, you know, or you're taking in all the negativity as dark light. So again, it can become in our culture a racial thing, that all the white is good and all the dark is bad. So I've tended more with meditations now. For years now, I've been taking that out of different meditations. And then now we have also some gender things sensitivity we want to think about. And there's always he or she, but there's some people that don't identify like that. So I just wanted to mention, so I've given some options in this meditation. So what I'd like you to do is, once again, we have a couple sessions today, couple sessions tomorrow if you're still around at that time, is I'd like you to consider your motivation. Some of you were up earlier and you were with us at the 8 o'clock session, or you've started a practice much earlier today. One thing I also want to mention, just out of respect for the teachings, and I know we're home and some of you might be in your pajamas, and that's absolutely fine. Like, it doesn't matter. Some of you prefer not to be on screen. You're doing other things. However, what's nice to get into a habit is when you're at a teaching, you're not eating or drinking. You're trying to really give your energy, your attention right now. Now, I know some of you may not have time to have breakfast and things, but it's nice to kind of show up with the attention so that you've got an active listening, reflecting, and meditating. That's, you know, we're going to review that again of how are we showing up at the teaching, okay? So again, you know, when we're distracted, what kind of pot are you? We discussed last night. You know, am I in the pot where the lid's on so tightly, nothing's getting in? Not really interested. Got other previous conceived notions about this teaching. My mind is made up, okay? Am I a pot where everything's leaking out the bottom because there's a hole? So I'm not retaining anything. Is there a pot where it's so dirty? And dirty also means distraction. I'm so distracted, I can't hear a word that's happening, you know, or my mind is cluttered with a lot of delusion right now. So I'm not really able to take in the teaching. So it's something to just think about, because what it does is it sets you up, I think, in a better mode for teachings, to get teachings to be in the right mind space, the right level of respect, like that. So I just wanted to mention that in general. Now, here's something else that's happened over the years, especially in the States. We in the States, we like our cups, we like our water bottles. There's a huge industry for the United States that doesn't exist in a lot of other countries. And when I'm on retreats with Rinpoche, and when I'm on retreats leading something in India, and there are people that have water bottles more and more. Most of them are Americans. The Europeans make fun of us with our water bottles. I've seen people with gigantic water bottles, and we like to hydrate, okay? There's nothing wrong with that. It's actually good for your health, okay? So what's happened is, in the early days when I started practicing, honestly, the thing was, and if you're with His Holiness in Dharamsala, India, and you see the way the Tibetans show up at teachings, their level of faith and devotion that I found is something a lot of Westerners, we don't have that built in so well. So I've learned a lot from my Asian sisters and brothers about faith and devotion and how they come to a teaching, and they have, somehow it's more built in based on their cultures, how they're raised. So we can learn a lot from each other. Sometimes I'm sitting near Tibetans at a program with the Dalai Lama, and the entire teaching, they sit like this, like usually attentive, right? They're not like hanging, like leaning against a pillar, wherever, you know, kind of dozing. They're totally, and their hands are often like this the entire teaching. I've seen Tibetan lay people like this, you know. So it kind of gives me a level of like, oh, attentiveness, you know, this respect of this is something really precious coming out, you know, from, and obviously with this holiness, you get a highly realized being. So what I noticed from the old days when I first started the Dharma and went to teachings, and teachings in the United States, Lama Zopa Rinpoche teaching, and so we got into this habit. Nobody drank during the teachings. Nobody drank until they would serve Rinpoche tea. Often the teacher, and many centers do this, which is lovely, you have a cup of liquid, whatever the people always ask, what does the teacher drink? So anytime we've hosted teachers at our centers, I would always ask the teacher or the attendant, what do you like to drink when you teach? And then whatever they said, and we would have that drink for them in a nice cup with a lid often. And we would have, you know, a thermos to, and that's what Shantideva Center does for any teacher that comes through. It's really nice offering respect. So only when that teacher goes for their drink to take a break and sips, would we ever sip if we had water. A lot of people never even brought water in because you weren't drinking. It wasn't the time to drink like that. But only if they did, and occasionally the center may serve, you know, a little bit of apple juice for people or pass it out. And then the teacher first drinks, and I usually don't drink until I see Lama Zopa Rinpoche drink at something, and then everybody can drink like that. And you want to try to drink without grasping as well. So again, all of these things, as I said yesterday, your Dharma in daily living, you want to keep folding these little pieces into your life. You know, can I be more mindful when I am drinking? Am I mindful at a teaching how I'm showing up? Because with Zoom, it's gotten really ordinary, right? And I've shown up at trainings I had to do for certain things. It wasn't a really big Dharma teaching type of thing, but I've shown up and had to shut my screen off because I was actually engaged in some other things at the time. I had to do a little bit of work while I was on it. So I, you know, had to participate in that because I didn't want to distract people. But I know that I didn't get as much out of it. I could tell like that. So again, what are we folding into showing up at something that'll create us to have a path for us to have better Dharma teachings, to be able to get all the teachings we want, to be able to attend the whole retreat. There's times I know people that have gone for a month-long retreat and it got interrupted by the death of a family member. Something happened, they got sick and they had to leave early and things like that. So you always want to kind of protect that space for you. And I personally don't mind if you're drinking when I'm teaching and things like that. It's just check your mind about sometimes the sloppiness with which we show up or something like that. And I just notice, I'm saying that from my own experience when I've kind of shown up in a bit of a sloppy way. And it doesn't, later when I check, I'm like, that didn't feel really good. So again, this is about you checking your mind. When you notice something, and a lot of you immediately know when you're doing something and you go, oh, that wasn't the best way for me to show up. So what we're kind of doing is we're molding our activities, molding our minds to keep showing up in a brighter, more virtuous way that is only going to make us happier and have the path really unfold for you. So I'd like you to just consider for a moment, if you can close your eyes. Think about how you'd like to show up for these sessions, what you're bringing to the space right now. And what's your purpose for being here? So not only what you're really interested in to hear about the Tantra, the practice of Tantra, but how might you use that skillfully in your life? And as Tantra is the quickest path, can be the quickest path to enlightenment, can I be able to practice Tantra in the proper way? So it can accelerate my path to enlightenment, but for the bigger purpose of benefiting all living beings. Benefiting all living beings. So if you're attuned to that and interested in that, feel free right now to include that in your motivation. And I'd just like you to settle your mind on your breath. And just let go any distractions you find arising. And just check that your body is as relaxed as possible. It doesn't matter if you're in a chair or seated cross-legged on a cushion on the floor or cross-legged in a chair. You may want to check that your spine is as extended as possible. If possible, not leaning too heavily against a wall or the back of the chair. So holding yourself erect makes the back stronger. And just scan your body for a couple of minutes, noticing any tension and using your breath to open up space in the tense areas, especially upon every inhalation. And upon every exhalation, releasing that tension as much as possible. And let's do the 9-round breathing to clear out the subtle energy. And what I'd like you to do is visualize in your body right now. So we're taking this a little deeper than last night's 9-round breathing. And I'd like you to visualize 3 channels that are running. The top end of the central channel, we're going to start with that one. It starts at the center of your forehead in the 3rd eye position. It's the diameter of a drinking straw, this channel. And it's slightly bluish on the outside, clear on the inside, but it is like a translucent tube of light. And it starts in the center of your forehead, and then it runs up to the crown, where it curves around and runs all the way back down the center of your body, slightly more towards your spine. Central channel, where the lower end of it comes 4 finger widths below your navel. 4 finger widths. I'm just holding up my hand to show just below your navel is the end of that central channel, that tube of light. Just imagine that in the center of your body. To its sides are the right and left channels. The right channel is slightly reddish on the outside, clear on the inside. The left channel slightly white on the outside. and clear on the inside. And they are half the diameter of the central channel. And they run right alongside the central channel, and their top ends start from the right and left nostril respectively. So once again, starting from the right and left nostrils, they run up, where they curl up to the crown, where they curl around and go all the way back down the spine, where their lower ends curve and enter the central channel. So just for a moment, set that visualization as best as you can, as if they're running through your body right now. This is part of the subtle energy system that we use in the highest level practices of Tantra, completion stage practices. But it's perfectly okay right now to get some sense of this without empowerment. And what we're going to do as we do the 9-round breathing, most of you are familiar with, we're going to start by closing off our left nostril, which you can do so with your finger. We're going to inhale through the right nostril deeply, and that's going to go into that right channel, all that air, and it's going to come all the way down through the right channel. Again, but the first couple rounds, we're going to have the lower ends of those side channels, instead of entering the central channel, they're going to enter one another. So as we inhale through that right channel, it goes all the way down, and as we exhale and close off the right nostril, exhaling through the left, that air is going to pass through into the left channel, and it's going to come back up through that left nostril and leave you. And the first 3 breaths we're going to do, we're lessening anger and hatred in our mind. Just imagine that. So we're clearing the channels out of that 3 times. And then we're going to reverse, and we're going to close off the right nostril. We're going to inhale deeply through the left. And again, we're bringing the air down that side left channel. As we exhale, it's going to cross over into the right channel and come up and back out through the right nostril as we exhale. This is lessening attachment and desire in our mind stream and in these subtle channels, which are connected to our subtle, most subtle mind. 3 times. Now I'd like you to imagine the bottoms of those side channels now curl to enter the central channel. We're going to do the last round, breathing in through both nostrils. The air goes down those side channels, and now it dissolves into the central channel, which is something we're actually trying to do in completion stage of Tantra. Bring those winds into the central channel to actualize higher states of realization. So we're just imagining, we're just practicing that. So 3 times, and imagine that wind dissolving in there 3 times. And this is lessening ignorance and confusion from your mind. And just allow the mind once again to settle on the breath. And if it wanders off at times, following a distraction, a thought, a sound, no problem. Just observe and bring it back to the breath. So I'd like you to feel right now, if you're in a chair and you can have your feet straight on the ground, or feel free to put them on a cushion if that's more comfortable. If you're seated cross-legged on a cushion, feel the grounding of your body on the cushion. And in the chair, feel that grounding of yourself, your feet on the ground, as if you're rooted to the earth, as if there's roots from the earth coming through you, either through your legs, through your cushion that you're seated on, not in a burdensome, leaden way. Again, in a supportive way. The earth is supporting us in our practice. And from this space of this support, feel all the goodness and benefits of that support that we have right now with our privilege, with this good karma ripening, that we have an ability to log on through various devices, the grace of Shanti Deva Center and our other centers to offer these programs, our good karma to have connected with these programs, to have connected with the Dharma, and just take a couple of minutes to really experience that gratitude for these wonderful situations in your life, and also your good qualities. Let's not forget that, which helps us balance and keep us away from anxiety and depression. And as this energy, this good energy that's always available to us through our experiencing and reflecting, literally reflecting on gratitude every day, we need to do some of this. So let this energy enter us deeply, permeating our entire being. And let it dissolve and loosen any blockages we feel are going on right now in us, body and mind. And any feelings of tightness or restriction, any sleepiness or confusion, any residue of anger, attachment, any other delusions that may be interfering with the clear, unimpeded flow of energy within us. Imagine that gently dissolving by this radiant light energy right now, moving through our system. These interferences, you can imagine, if they pop up, are in the form of a thick fog or smoke. And every time you exhale, imagine them leaving you through your breath. Let go of the interferences, gently expelling them with every exhalation. They drift away, removed like smoke from a chimney. They evaporate into empty space. We're not forcing it, okay? Just continuing to breathe. Breathing in cleansing light energy, whatever color that may represent you, if it has a color, and expelling this thick, smoke-like energy with the out breath. And smoke takes all forms of colors as well. And in this way, we can dissolve, we can let go of, and gently expel not only the delusions and their karmic residue, but even the sense of our body's heaviness and solidity. As we continue to breathe in and out in this fashion, feel yourself growing lighter, as if your body was slowly transforming from a gross physical object into a spacious body of light, allowing your awareness to expand and allowing you to experience the mind's innate clarity. Just try as best as you can. And after a while, you can relax your conscious control over the breath and simply let it come and go as it does. We focus our attention instead, so instead of on the breath, on whatever clarity, freedom, in a sense, spaciousness or weightlessness, light, perhaps joy, or even bliss that we may have experienced as a result of the cleansing breaths we've taken. And even if there's only been a slight shift in your feelings of openness and well-being, you can focus attention gently but firmly on that experience itself, so that our mind and this experience of unfolding, of relaxation, of light, of joy, perhaps of bliss, become unified, totally pervading one another. And slowly now begin to bring yourself back to your space, in your room, in your house, wherever you are. Keeping that spaciousness of the mind, but just being aware a little bit more of your body in the room. And when you're ready, slowly open your eyes. Just observe anything arising in your mind. So 5-minute break. And so that way if people, a lot of people in the morning, they've had their coffee, if you need a bathroom break, but this way you can kind of settle the other stuff from the morning and just take a 5-minute break and keep yourself in the break just aware of that spaciousness of the body. If you had any sense of that clarity of the nature of the mind, rather than a leaden experience of me and my body and my troubles, see if you can just experience in the break. If you just want to stay where you are seated, perfectly fine. Just 5 minutes. Okay. The reason it's nice to take a 5-minute break right after the meditation is to notice a daily activity emerging or the body becoming gross again. And so right there, that meditation is actually a part of one of the meditations, the meditation on the resource page, one of the ones from John Landau, slightly adapted and edited. And so what I mentioned, we're going to go into the rest of it later on. So just that part of the spaciousness starts to get you into a sense of how we can start practicing Tantra. Now, you're not really going to be practicing Tantra until you have the proper empowerment. And I am going to talk more about that in the subsequent sessions. But again, just allowing the spaciousness in the mind, which we rarely do in everyday life. We're so jammed and busy, and not even if we are during COVID, some people are not as busy, okay? But what happens is the mind is busy, cluttered with thoughts and distractions from too many things you're seeing on a screen, too many garbage sites that you're looking at perhaps, or things you're streaming on YouTube or Netflix, and they do clutter up the mind, and they all leave an imprint. So just that basic, it's a normal breathing meditation. We've done it many times before in different variations, but allowing the lightness of the body, allowing that lightness of the body. So in order to practice Tantra well, one of the big paths is cleansing, purification. And many lamas that were asked through all these different readings I've done about Tantra, and they always say what was the most important thing was purification practices. Purification. We need to purify. I had a friend years ago, she's a great meditator, really great yogini, American woman, American laywoman. It's really inspiration for me. And she's really pivotal, one of the pivotal people that got me into robes, that really was a condition of my getting ordained, was a brief conversation with her. Paula Chichester, Venerable Ninjay. And she was a nun for some years, and she's a really inspiring practitioner. So one time she was saying to me, as Westerners, we've had, I don't know all your stories, we've had pretty decent lives for the most part. And compared to when I'm in Nepal, for instance, when I'm at Laudo, and when I see how the people in that region live, and this is the lay people, if you're fortunate, you could get ordained and be a monk or nun. But that's not the majority of the people there. So a few people, in a sense, and I'm going to use this word for that region, escaped the lay life, the grueling work of the lay life by getting ordained. And they were able to go to Kopan Monastery or nunnery, and they were able to study, learn languages really well, and study. And one of them, my kind of little sister from Laudo, who was raised at Laudo, she is next year going to become Geshe-ma and finish her degree. It was delayed a year because of COVID. So she sent me a WhatsApp recently saying how disappointed she was that they couldn't go to India to take her final exams. But she was a poor girl in the Laudo region, a cousin of Rinpoche's, suffered extreme child abuse. And this is her, so her life would have been, she grew up, and her life as a child was doing arduous tasks of reaping, cutting all the grass in the season for the animals, feeding the animals, taking the animals out in the morning, bringing them back in, cutting up potatoes and planting potatoes, backbreaking work of harvesting the crops and milking the cows, if you had cows. making food, and then you'd be married. You'd be given to a family, especially if you're a girl. And then you'd kind of become property of that family. You'd be married and you'd have to live with them normally. And you'd be running their thing. And from morning to night, that's your existence. And there'd be a few festivals you could go and enjoy and take the day off. And you'd have kids like that, mostly not being born in a hospital without any pain relief. And that's the life I've seen of these people. So there's like that. So there's a young woman that works at Laudo. She's wonderful, Sangmo. And I believe she's still there now, and she's cooked, and she has a job there, and she gets paid. But I just see her life. She was born to a poor family, and she lives about an hour from Laudo, and she lives at Laudo when she's working there. But from morning to night, it's starting the fire in the thing, and then they have some electric burners to cook. And if there's a group, when there were tourists coming through, cooking all day, doing this, cleaning up, washing the bed linens, taking care of, retreaters, and feeding the few old people that are there. And it's just grueling work. Every day the same. Every day waking up to another day of work, but without any breaks. And she learned to practice Dharma. She's been taught by one of the old monks at Laudo, and she makes water bowl offerings, and she does prostrations, and she's reading Tibetan now, studying a little bit. And that's like the little bit she can squeeze in between. So think about us. We have a very different situation. You have a lot of your day to practice outside of those working full time, okay? But you have a lot of your day. Some of you are retired, wonderful, right? How much time are we spending? So we have to think about that. And so Paula said to me once, we have to suffer. She said, we need to suffer. And I think I was going through a very difficult time at the center, or I was talking to her when I was running Vajrapani about a really difficult period I'd gone through running the center. And people like Jennifer, who've been in that position at centers, know how hard it can be when you've got a job and you're running the center. And I was actually full-time at Vajrapani, fortunately doing that, just full-time at the center, but it was still really difficult. And I was saying how it was really transformative for me. And Paula said, we need to suffer. We need to go through that. So she didn't mean it in a masochistic way. She meant it in it purifies. Any kind of suffering you endure is purification. And I use the word endure. So this is Lama Zopa Rinpoche's main message, is what I heard him say once at a big retreat. What I'm most interested in my disciples is how they bear hardship. So we don't want to hear that as Westerners. We want it easy. Okay, but that's not the path. That's not the Dharma path that's going to get you into practicing Tantra and maximizing this opportunity you have and your potential as a human. So something to think about when you go through a difficult time. This is the cleansing. This is the cleansing. And it's not like we're signing up for difficulty. We're not trying to make it any more difficult, but difficulties are going to rear their heads. How do you want to deal with them? And we'd like to deal with them with a spacious consciousness, and that meditation of that spaciousness of the body-mind. And I'm breathing in the light, the joy, getting closer to that clarity of mind, clarity of consciousness, letting go the disturbances. And so you can always come back to that meditation really quickly. And that is in the resources that Jennifer shares with you like that for this course. So yesterday we discussed the common preliminaries. There are common preliminaries to practicing Tantra, and there are uncommon preliminaries we're going to talk about later in another session. Common preliminaries, again, I mentioned the three principles of the path: renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. And as they're called, as John Landau refers to them, sometimes Alex Berzin, emerging, opening, dissolving. The emerging from the swamp, from the dirt, is renunciation. The lotus comes out unstained, okay? But you have to want to get rid of your suffering. You have to be able, that's what we're renouncing with renunciation, our suffering. Not giving away all your belongings, not saying you don't want any food and you're starving. It's understanding how you're suffering, that you are suffering at times when you're imputing pleasure on it. So again, I want to speak a little bit more, a little further on give up this life in your mind that I mentioned last night. Give up this life in your mind came from a very profound teaching. I've heard many of my teachers say this, but the quote is, the story is, the monk that goes to his Lama, and I always get, I don't remember the names necessarily, but the monk goes to his Lama and says, oh, look, I'm putting all the water bowls up every day. I'm putting all the water bowls up. See how nicely putting all the water bowls up, practicing like this. And the Lama looks at him and he says, that's very, very good. Now maybe you should practice Dharma. So he's confused. And he says, I thought the water bowls are practicing Dharma. You know, he made this nice altar. And so then he goes back to his practice and he gets into studying one of the deep texts really well and studying. And he really wants to tell the Lama about this. See, I'm studying now. See, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. So he finally, after another checkup, he goes to the Lama, his teacher, and he says, well, now I've studied this text. I've learned this. I've done this. This is what I've done. Isn't this great? And the Lama says, that's really, really good that you've studied that text. So now maybe you should concentrate on practicing Dharma. That would be really good if you could practice Dharma. So the monk is really like, I thought that's what this is. So then he decides it's retreat. Maybe I'll do retreat. So he goes into retreat for a little bit and has his things. He goes into retreat and all of it is, you know, I'm going to be doing this retreat. And isn't this important? I'm doing this retreat. And this is so great. I'm doing this retreat and I'm great and on. And he comes back and checks in with his teacher. And he says, well, now I did this retreat. And this is what I did. And I really got into it. And this was really great. And this is what I'm doing. And the teacher said, that's really, really good that you did that retreat. But now maybe what would be really, really great is if you could practice Dharma. And so the monk was completely confused and he said, everything you've been doing has really been out of your own kind of self-absorption of what you feel you want to do. And it's all been very much focused around building up your ego, the different practices you were doing. You know, how nice it looked and how people were noticing and things like that and telling people about it. And he said, give up this life in your mind. Give up any attachment to what you're trying to do just for this life, just for this life. If that's all it's about, how it's going to work in this life, that it's going to get you happiness in this life, give it up. That's renunciation. That's the level of renunciation. And you start to realize, now it doesn't mean we're going to give up our practices. We have to practice now to make imprints, but let's focus them on the future lives. We're here already. We got here. We found an authentic path. We're trying to practice it. That's important. But what's your motivation? You know, is it so people will say, I did this and I can show up and say, now I know that. I finished the DB modules. I did 100,000 prostrations. I finished my Nundro. It's one thing if you're saying something to people with a motivation to inspire, to tell people something that it inspires in a certain way, and that's really your intention, not just to better, like against somebody else. I'm better than you. I've done this. Oh, I've done that. I've had that initiation. I'm there. As soon as there's any self-promotion, self-absorption in there, the self being bigger, it's not Dharma. It's not Dharma. Dharma is about countering delusion in your mind. So keep thinking about that in the process of how can I practice Tantra? We just want to be honest with ourselves, right? And it's hard, real renunciation, where they say, again, authentic realization of renunciation, when you've attained renunciation, okay, which is what gets you to the first path of the 5 paths to get enlightened, okay? But a sign of it is you're striving day and night to get out of samsara, striving day and night to get out of samsara, and then you enter the path of accumulation, where you're accumulating the conditions to see emptiness directly, like that. So there's 5 paths, and a lot of people think they're already on the path of accumulation, that they're already on the path where they're accumulating positive deeds, and until we have proper renunciation, we're not really even on that path. So we're doing our best. We do our best. Don't give up and think that this is going to be forever. This is lifetimes. Okay, but we have a guide and we're making imprints now. Okay, so we want to emerge. We want to emerge from our suffering. Okay, and then we have the opening. What are we opening? Our hearts to bodhicitta. We're pretty familiar with the teachings on bodhicitta, 2 methods to develop bodhicitta. We're not going to go into those, that's a different teaching, but the cause and effect, 7-point cause and effect method to develop bodhicitta from the Buddha through many great masters, through Master Sir Lingpa in Indonesia, to us, taught to me through my teachers, 7-point cause and effect of seeing all beings as your mother and reaching bodhicitta like that through great compassion and great love and things like that. And the secret method passed on from the Buddha via Master Shantideva, the equalizing and exchanging self with others. So we want to keep this opening. And when you do the meditation of the light and the energy, and it talks about an openness, a spaciousness. So can you keep that going just on our level in your daily activities? I give an example. Every morning, and some of you are doing this, what Rinpoche likes us to do now first thing in the morning is called the method to transform a suffering life into happiness. Okay? A method to transform a suffering life into happiness. Well, that's what we'd like to do, is to transform our suffering lives into happiness. Sounds good. Okay? And what it is it's scanning, a very brief scanning meditation or reflection verses on the Lam Rim. And then it goes into some Lojong verses. And then there's some mantras of blessing our speech and creating these mantras that multiply all the virtue of the mantras you say during the day and your activities. And at the very end of it, it says, may I today practice virtue, in relation to others. Like one of the last lines that I think of is, today I'm going to practice virtue with all living beings. I'm going to practice virtue with all living beings. So that rotates through my mind more and more, because I do that every morning. It's the first thing I do when I wake up. So may I practice virtue? So I went to the supermarket yesterday. I was in the supermarket, but I was in a hurry. And I was kind of something I had to get back. And I was meeting with somebody on Zoom, and I was kind of like, let me just stop by the store, because I voted yesterday. And from the vote, I went to the store because I went by the store. You get the thing. We have this a lot. We're rushing. And I was rushing in the store, and somebody really slowly was walking in front of me, and I had my little rush moment of me, this, and then I went, and the line came up on my mind, may I practice virtue with all, today I'm going to practice virtue. And I just slowed, and immediately the spaciousness came to my body and mind. Okay, so again, just familiarity. I'm not any great practitioner, but just the familiarity, which you can also do from that meditation we just did this morning, that part of the meditation, because we're going to do these sessions. I'm going to combine some practice with some teachings. And so there I was behind the person, and I was like, and then all these waves of gratitude came back to me of, isn't it great? I have this store near my house. Isn't it great they have the thing I want, which is why I'm in the store, and that I have the money to purchase it, and that it's this easy to do it. And that this person that's slowly in front of me is like, and it's a little bit like, sometimes I'll be like, Rinpoche, is that you? Like teaching me right there, slow down. Why? So I can watch my mind. I was caught up in utter delusion for a moment, just circling around, not conscious of anybody. And suddenly I had a moment, mindfulness. Oh, right. I get this opportunity to practice virtue with someone. I get this opportunity to practice virtue. And there we were in the aisle together, coming actually to the same part, the same area of the store. It's a big store. But here, me and this person, and then I got to help them with one of the freezers that wasn't opening, that they got jammed up. And so suddenly you have this chance of creating positive energy, a positive seed in my mind. And I very happily was so happy to be there to help them like that. And here's another thing with vulnerability. Some of you are noticing, it depends on your age. So as I get older, I do find more vulnerability coming up in my mind as opposed to when I was 22. where you feel invincible. You can do anything. I mean, that's kind of how I felt like I went through my 20s, almost in a little bit of a reckless way to some degree, very unconscious. Fortunately, meeting the Dharma at the end of my 20s, like that. But, you know, the way you go along. And so now when the vulnerability comes up, that some people feel as weakness. I've mentioned this before in previous classes, okay? And to quote from Brene Brown, the great sociologist in Texas, she doesn't see vulnerability as weakness at all. She sees it as the birthplace of innovation, creativity, and change. Okay, so here is me noticing vulnerability a little bit more, meaning, you know, my knees hurt a little bit more. And as a result of that, when it's wet outside from the rain, if I'm walking down a hill, I'm a little more cautious how I walk because I don't want to fall, right? Because my mother and grandmother fell and injured their knees severely and had to have knee replacements. So I'm a little bit more in that, uh-oh, little bit danger sign comes up. But as a result of that feeling, me walking to the back of the store with this older person, was much older than me, moving much more slowly, kind of hunched over, right? I had empathy for them, thinking, wow, it must be a lot to come into this big store and how long it took them to get to the back of the store, right? They couldn't be motoring through their activities the way I was. It wasn't possible for them physically. So, and then you come there, and what if you come to that freezer and you can't access the box you want at the very top, and there's nobody around, and you're kind of waiting, and then you have to move slowly to find somebody that can help you. You know how hard it is to find people in these stores to help you? So suddenly I was there with them, and that's how we support each other. That's how we support each other, right? And it's part of our community activities that will get us through any difficulty, forming those healthy relationships with people. And then me and this person had this lovely little interlude, me and this old man with this lovely little 2-second meeting. And he was so happy and I was so happy, and connection, positive connection, like that. That's how the world goes around in a more harmonious way. And I will definitely take some questions at the end of each session as well. I'll make some time like that. Thank you. So again, this spaciousness you want to bring up. So bodhicitta, am I going to bring that in to my everyday life? So I wanted you to connect at the 5-minute break. And we'll try to take a little 5 minutes in each session, 5-minute break, where you notice from meditation, did we just slump right back down into the ordinary view? Because with Tantra, you don't want to do that. You're going to have an extraordinary view when you're ultimately practicing Tantra. And what I found on Tantric retreats, and all the commentaries I've read about retreats, most of them say the break time is almost as important, if not more, than the actual session. Meaning a session where you're in there doing a visualization, maybe counting mantras, and we focus a lot on that. How much are we counting? How many mantras did we count? How many, but the break time, as soon as you go back to your ordinary view, you've lost it. So again, we're trying to keep the mind with us in the spaciousness. Maybe there's some clarity. Okay, and from that comes bliss and joy. Can you keep that? So I'm in the supermarket. Maybe next time I walk into the supermarket, from the very first step in the mode of bliss and joy. And then I'm very focused on all the people around me. Bodhicitta, open heart. I'm opening to that. That's part of our setup of common preliminaries in order to practice Tantra well. You can't forget the basis. And the old adage they have in Tibetan Buddhism is, people want to practice Tantra because they see images of deities with a consort in sexual union, is what it looks like, okay? Tantra is not about ordinary sex at all. But we see these images and we don't understand them when we go, oh, look at that. And then people say, when I first met the Dharma, people said, oh, well, that's Tantra, it's Tantric practice. So you get very, some people get very attracted. I want to do that, or they hear that it's higher level practice. So they want to jump immediately. And when I got into this, there had already been students who had been around about 10 or 15 years. And I was the newbie, the new person. So when I heard about their Tantric retreats and their empowerments, and suddenly I wanted to be part of that club. And I couldn't do it because I didn't have the initiations and I wasn't ready. So they say if you're jumping, you want to just do the tantric retreats and the tantric practice, okay, but you have no foundation like that. It's like putting the roof on the house without having the proper foundation, and it's going to fall, it's going to collapse. That's what will happen to your practice. I've had several friends when I started in the Dharma, and then I, after a few years, went back to India, and I was fortunate to be able to do a couple of years solidly at that time of study and retreat, and was working through some of the nundro, some of the preliminary practices, and doing some tantric retreats. And I had friends early on, they were a little bit ahead of me, you know, several years. And I had one friend, and he said, I don't intend to do any nundro, he said, the preliminary practices. What do preliminary practices do? They cleanse, they purify, okay? The second thing they also do is they accumulate. They help you accumulate the positive conditions you need to practice well, to get tantric empowerment, to understand what that means, to keep your vows, okay? So, and I'll give you, we have 9 preliminaries in our tradition. Most of you are familiar with them. Preliminaries like, and you do a certain number. Normally the number of them that you do is recommended by your guru, by a highly qualified, highly realized mind. Some people have gotten practices like this from Rinpoche, where they've asked for life practices. So you can do a number of prostrations with the prayer, the 35 confession Buddhas. You can do Vajrasattva mantras. Usually the normal standard number is 100,000 of them. Depends. Sometimes you get less to do. You can do refuge. There's certain prayers and visualizations you do. Samaya Vajra purifies broken vows with the guru. Another, one of the shortest nundro, a very short mantra you do with the visualization. You can make tsatsas, images of the Buddha in a certain way. And it all involves prayers and practices with it like that. You can offer water bowls. You can do a burning offering, Dorje Kadro. You can do guru yoga. And you can make mandala offerings. Those are our 9 nundro. But there's other nundro, but those are kind of standard preliminary practices. Some of the other traditions, Kagyu tradition, Nyingma tradition, they do, they focus sometimes on 4 or 6 of them. But what we all share together are usually Vajrasattva, prostration, sometimes with refuge, guru yoga, and usually mandala offerings are usually done by all the traditions like that. Right. The Gelugpa kind of drives it home a little bit more maybe, okay? But so having done a number of these, I see the benefit in my mind. And so I had a friend who said, I don't intend to do any of them. I just want to do tantric practice, okay? So I was kind of intrigued, and I thought, I had an attraction to do nundro from the beginning. Good imprint for me, I'd say. Like whoever did the work in my mind before had some kind of imprint to do things in the right order. Like I'm glad I was happy to do that. Like I just wanted to study Lam Rim. I wanted to meditate on the Lam Rim. I wanted to do these nundro. After doing one, I saw the benefit for my mind. I was very impressed. I was like, wow, this really works, right? So he had no intention. And then when I heard this, I thought, well, maybe I don't need to do these nundro. Maybe I can just, but anyway, I slogged along for a bit. And then I met him a few years later, and there he was doing his water bowls. And I said, well, oh, what happened? And he goes, oh, the Tantra practice, nothing worked, nothing. He goes, it was just, I had no experience, no bliss, no realization of anything. It just pain and just doing nothing, you know, kind of, I should have been watching TV, he said. So he went back, and that's okay. Like we all learn in different ways. And he went back and he was really clearing out, doing these things, and he was enjoying, and he saw all the effect they had on his mind. So now Lama Zopa Rinpoche, I'll put it this way, there's many ways to purify, to cleanse, but these nundros are designed for ordinary people to do, and you can do them often when you're working full-time. I did some of them working full-time. I would do a session in the morning, get up a little earlier, and I would do a session in the evening. If I had a little bit more time on a day off, I might do a 3rd session like that. You do the best you can. Sometimes I felt sick, I had to do a really short session, you know, something like that. But you just try to keep some consistency. It can take you a while, and on you go like that. But now Rinpoche's added some sutra recitations for people that have a very nice effect on the mind. and they recite the sutras. Sometimes Rinpoche has people reciting the 4 immeasurables as a kind of purification. And that has an effect on the mind. Sometimes it's reciting, again, I said sutras, the Heart Sutra, but really with quality, with reflection. So again, the Nundro and these preliminaries are designed to be done for quality. Don't worry about the quantity. The quality is much more important. I've noticed from my own practices, and you get lost. It's a natural thing to get lost in the counting. I want to get the 50,000 done. I need to get them done. I need to do this many a day. I want to finish by the end of October. Okay, so then you jam yourself, you're pushing, and then you get a little bit of lung, a little bit of a wind imbalance. You get irritable, things like that. So again, focus more on the quality. It's much better to have the better quality. I've noticed that with my mind. Doing them the right way as opposed to just getting them done has been better for my mind. And I've done them both ways. So I've seen the effect of like, go back, and some of them I've done again because and each time I finish one, I think I could do that again. I get much more out of it now. So it's really powerful. I can't stress the purification and the cleansing. Most of us, a lot of us are doing Vajrasattva, a little bit of practice in the evening. I do it every evening. Quick Vajrasattva meditation. It comes in the very beginning of most of the Tantric sadhanas. Okay, sadhana, I never pronounce it right. Is it sadhana or sadhana? It's a Sanskrit word, and it means method of accomplishment. Method of accomplishment. What it is it's a practice. You can have a practice booklet of this. And I would say this particular Tantric sadhana, they usually all start in the beginning with, after the refuge and bodhicitta, they have some basic preliminary prayers, which we're going to do a little later with Shakyamuni Buddha to show you how do you set it up, okay? And what they're going to do is, after you set that up, the Vajrasattva mantra and the Vajrasattva quick practice comes right in the beginning to purify so that I have a better session. So we really need to get that understanding of how important those purification practices are to make our tantric experience richer, okay? Then we come to emptiness. Dissolving. So again, emerging, renunciation, opening, bodhicitta, and dissolving everything into emptiness, meaning continuing to poke at your reality, yourself and all the phenomena, yourself and all other phenomena like that. I can be in the supermarket, and if I have the right space of mind and the right mindfulness, looking around, everything is a product. Everything is a product. I'm walking down the big aisle in the store to go to the back aisle that I need, where the thing is that I need. This was yesterday. The tiles of the floor. The floor is pretty solid to hold all those counters and displays and freezers and whatever. Floor seems really solid. Where is the floor? Where's the floorness of the floor? The inherently existent floor. Doesn't exist at all. Not there at all. Do I really look at the floor? It's a product of different tiles, linoleum laid here, and even those are made of molecules moving around a configuration. You can keep checking everything. Keep checking the external reality. Some people get a little tossed by what's going on the planet right now. The COVID virus doesn't inherently exist. Made up of molecules moving around in a configuration. If it causes suffering in your reality, okay, if somebody you know gets COVID, if you get COVID, if somebody you know dies of COVID or suffers a great deal from it, there's no inherent existence to that. It's simply a karmic ripening in your mind of a negative seed, a negative deed you did before that's coming up causing you to suffer right now. One way to look at it, just to deflect a little bit of my, what do I want to say, a kind of excitement that I get in my mind, which is another delusion, an aversion in my mind around it, a drama in my mind around it. So I can keep my mind balanced by noting the lack of inherent nature, noting the karmic relationship with that the only reason I'm experiencing the suffering now is due to a negative imprint in the past that I created, Not that I'm a bad person, but it got created, it's done. Now it's coming up. The fact that it comes up is a type of purification. The fact that it arises as suffering for me can be seen as a certain purification, okay? But I'm going to keep my mind balanced. And from it's that place that I can then use that open heart to take action. What do I need to do? Okay? What do I need to do? Can I quarantine with a balanced mind? Can I go out in the supermarket and wear my mask because I feel like that's going to protect us as much as possible? You know, can I go out in the space around me and just not be attacking anybody politically about why that lawn sign's on their lawn or this sign in their window? Or can I just be peaceful with that and realize it's simply an external manifestation of the inner workings of my mind? And if there's something out there I don't like, I need to keep dismantling the delusions in my mind through purification practices, through these preliminary practices, and accumulate the conditions I need to practice well. That's what changes your external reality. And along that space, I once again, with that line, today I get to, let me practice virtue, as much virtue as possible with living beings. That's how I want to be in the space, either in my home with others, or my home alone, or in my home alone on Zoom, or when I go out in my neighborhood to take a walk, in the store, however, like that. So all of again, we said yesterday, this microcosm informing the macrocosm, okay? The macrocosm feeding back into the microcosm. Oh, I got unpeaceful for a moment. Oh, that's the work I need to do, okay? So again, Tantra, thread, continuum, continuity. It's a thread that I'm running this through my mind so that I have this continuous instrument. Again, it's an instrument of this continuum that I'm going to use to inform, like that. Okay, I'd like to do, let me see if there's one question here. Is there a reference to find the practice you mentioned? Okay, yes, the method to transform a suffering life. Jennifer, amazing. Instantaneous. It's incredible. Thank you. So that's for Maureen, who's in North Carolina, an old friend, Maureen Lynch. Thank you. So Jennifer, there is, for everyone, there is the link to the method to transform a suffering life, like that. It's really beautiful. It's just, and it's a quick practice, honestly, in the morning now. I mean, you end up memorizing it. So is it the beginning verses, or maybe could it be 5 or 10 minutes maximum, like that? It's pretty quick. So there's the references there. Are there any questions right now?
No, but Amy, there was one thing I was thinking of. I mean, I feel differently now than when I first started practicing, is that I felt like when something negative happened, that it was like, well, you don't get any comforting or any sympathy or any sense of, because you deserve it. It's your own negative karma. And it felt so like cruel, I thought. It just felt like, so I'm not even, like, if I'm with Buddhist practitioners, well, it's your karmic seed. It's like, so like aloof. I mean, and I know it's not like that now, and I know there's a lot of purification, but initially, you know, I'm not sure, like, how do you feel when somebody is suffering, or when somebody is, are you still compassionate about that? Or is it just like, well, it's a chance for them to purify?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, good question. Partly if it's yourself, because in the beginning, and one example I give, when I was running Vajrapani Institute in California, we'd get many new Buddhists. Some people not even Buddhists work there on the staff. We had a full-time staff. And people would come, and what would happen is they had this idea, isn't it cool to work in the redwoods in California? You know, it was their own intention to come there. It wasn't that they were sent by a teacher. Great, oh, that's really cool. I want to live in the redwoods and do that. And then after 3 months, the novelty wore off. And if they were hired around July or August in the summer, it's warmer, there's light, da 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 da. But once you got into the late autumn and the rain started and it got chilly, and we didn't have proper heating at the time, and it was, suddenly I could see their mind going downhill, and then they'd get sick and they'd get a flu or something. And it's hard to live around redwood trees in the winter. The native people didn't, because they held a lot of molds. And so a lot of us coughed all winter. and had different things like that. And they'd get sick in the beginning. And it's a place of deep purification, I would say. So people, and then I'd hear some other staff person, a newer Dharma student, say to this person who wasn't even Buddhist or a brand new Buddhist and say, wow, it's really, really good purification. And that's the last thing they want to hear then when they're sick and like this. So the one thing is you want to certainly have compassion for people that are suffering. It's not about blaming them. And if it's our own minds, it's about taking responsibility. For me to wake up and realize, well, it's interesting. I always have this reaction and this response to this person or doing it. And it never seems to be very peaceful for them, me, or in my mind. And it seems to be creating more problems. So I need to learn to do something differently. This way I'm doing it's not working. In fact, I notice every time I do that, it makes me suffer. Let's wake up. It is about getting woke in a sense, as some of my friends say. So let's kind of wake up. So I'm not blaming myself, but I know as a human I made mistakes. I know in this life I've made mistakes. I didn't intend to do it. I'm not out to harm people, but we blow it. I'm limited. I don't know. So can I learn from those mistakes? Also, can we learn a little bit more quickly so I don't have to repeat the mistake too many more times? But sometimes we don't get it and we have to repeat it and go, okay, when am I going to get it? I'm pretty thick-headed myself, so it takes me a little while. And then if you see somebody else suffering again, depending on their level of, their level of Buddhist knowledge, and if they're a Buddhist, and then we might be able to say, well, it's also purification, but I'm so sorry. And I would definitely empathetically listen to them and feel them out in their suffering and try to support them as best as they can, not blaming them. But once, as a practicing Buddhist, they're going to start realizing I can't keep perpetuating this behavior, or in my suffering, if I keep blaming everything external from me, slowly you can start to check in. I've checked in with some non-Buddhists about the blame game, having them notice, where does it get you? Does it really solve anything? Because now you determined who broke the lamp. Okay, they broke the lamp. They didn't want to replace it. They didn't pay. They left. We had people at the retreat center. Somebody burned the floor in one of the cabins really badly and seemed to continue to do it with incense, like total disregard. Okay, we knew who did it. When I met her, I realized she had some really big issues. So if I keep blaming her, what then? We just need to fix the floor, and we could make a decision whether we would rent another cabin to her. That was actually discussed at the center because she was so destructive. So those are kind of things you can take, but I can't change someone else's mind, but you can set some boundaries and you can slowly, like there are some people I know, not Buddhists, I mentioned that when I discussed blame with them and talked a little bit with them about, does it really help you to keep blaming the person? It looks like you're really pent up, but they're not really affected by it at all. They've kind of let it go. So then they start realizing, so they can set boundaries in the future with that person if they want. They can directly discuss with the person, you broke this lamp at the center, it costs $30. Would you like to make an offering to replace it? Like at least let them take some responsibility. If they don't want to, let it go. Like that. Does that help? Okay. So the breathing meditation document, I believe, Jennifer, I think that's in the resources. Is that correct? John Landau's meditation?
I will double check.
Okay, thanks. And what I can do is send you my version because it's a little, the edited version. I think I sent that to you, but double check and you can let me know at the break, at the lunch break, and we can repost that. Absolutely. 7-point method to develop bodhicitta is part of the Lam Rim. Yes, Chris. Yeah, that is in the bodhicitta teaching. So that's going to come again in the higher scope of the Lam Rim, which is the scope of the motivation of somebody that's not, is motivated to practice with the first level where they're afraid things are going to be worse when they die. They're also building on that motivation. They feel like they'd love to get out of their own suffering, middle scope, and then build on that. They realize that just to eliminate their own suffering is not enough. And wouldn't it be great if they could attain enlightenment to lead all others out of their suffering? And so the bodhicitta are teachings, the 7-point cause and effect method are part of those teachings, like that. And pretty much the beginning of that section on bodhicitta, like that. And then the one with the colored visualization, Naga, you mean the breathing meditation I just led? Because that is the one I'm going to make sure Jennifer has. I think she does in the resources, if that's the one that you meant. Okay. Okay, so any suffering, here's a comment from someone, is past unskillful action ripening, yes, and offers a present opportunity, can be a present opportunity to purify, yes, David, that's correct. So you can see it as purification is what I'm saying. I do know people, honestly, with cancer. The biggest message was this was a highly realized being, Kirti Senchab Rinpoche, who was a Lama I traveled with in 94 in the States, 1994, but for 2 years, from 2002 to 2004, no, 2004 to 2006, all over the world. He was a great, great Buddhist teacher and yeah, incredible teacher, the Dalai Lama and Lama Zopa Rinpoche, and he got liver cancer in Israel on our third tour together. And it's such a message from my mind to see him very peaceful and doing Tonglen practice repeatedly. And he said, you know, now I can really do Tonglen. Like now he could take it on in his cancer. He could take on all the suffering in the world in his cancer and let that chip away. He didn't have any self-cherishing, but normally we let it chip away at our self-cherishing and then share all of his happiness, give away all of his happiness and peace like that. So there are people that when they're suffering, they're connected with that energy and say, okay, if I have a terrible migraine right now, I'm suffering anyway. Let me just imagine all the beings with migraines. And could I just take on their migraines in mine? Your migraine doesn't necessarily get worse at our level. We're not taking on their migraine. It's a state of mind. And if you can use your energy to familiarize your mind with taking on others' suffering and offering them all your happiness, all your virtue, all your merits, positive energy, all the good situations you have, it's such a huge space of mind for you. Like if you die at that moment with your mind familiar with Tonglen, it's really powerful for you. It's really powerful for the mind at the time of death and the mind during life right now. Yeah, so I think that's helpful. It is a present opportunity to purify. Okay, so we've got, thank you, Jennifer, the 9-round breathing, which is, there are variations on that. So that's just one that I don't know how Kurukul Center leads it particularly. And sometimes it's led with the 3 channels. I wanted you to get a sense of those, which we use in Tantric practice. A lot of people don't want to teach that with it, but you can teach that and like that. So there you go. Okay, what I'd like to do is we're going to do a brief practice now, Shakyamuni Buddha. And I want to just get you used to with a deity, which is what we're doing in Tantric practice, in generation stage. So there's 2 stages of Tantric practice, generation and completion stage. Generation stage is after we've taken a Tantric empowerment. And I am going to talk about that in the future, what happens in the empowerments of what I can say, and also the 4 levels of Tantra we're going to get into. And then the subtleties of the most subtle mind. And this is the key between Sutra and Tantra and why Tantra is the fastest. We're going to talk about tomorrow. So what we're often doing is once you've taken Tantric empowerment, which you come to through purifying a lot, finding qualified teacher, and understanding all the levels of that. Okay, the Tonglen I did with the Brazil Center. Okay, so that's nice. So you can look at that one. The you're going to be doing normally some sort of deity practice. The first level of Tantra, the first stage is generation stage, meaning you're generating yourself as a deity in the deity's pure realm or mandala, their world system, which is all a dance of light and precious and, and pure and things like that. If we could then interact with our daily life in that way as much as possible, great. So now at our levels, if you haven't had tantric empowerment, it's best to go out with the virtuous state of mind, again, with those 3 levels of the 3 principles of the path, okay? Meaning, I'm not going to engage in more activities that make me suffer, okay? And I'm going to be doing analytical meditation of the Lam Rim as much as I can in my practice to understand the levels of the lower scope, the different topics, bringing myself to the different levels of the way I suffer, generating this renunciation of suffering, like that. And then an understanding of suffering. So that I can really start to move into opening my heart to others' suffering and really wishing them to be free of suffering and moving into the bodhicitta teachings. And then certainly questioning everything and dissolving everything with emptiness, continuing to work on emptiness by first understanding the teachings on emptiness, reading about the teachings on emptiness, showing up online. You can find many teachings on emptiness, and then learning to meditate on emptiness. There is a meditation I can direct you to on my website where I'm leading a meditation on emptiness, or please go to Lama Zopa Rinpoche's meditations and things like that. Also chips away from a different angle each time, like very helpful. So building that basis, eventually, hopefully you'll be able to find the right teacher to take a tantric empowerment. And then they can give you certain deity practices, or you might be attracted to one. And you generate yourself through this practice as this deity, and you do certain practices and you'll recite some mantras. So just to get a little sense that we're going to practice with Shakyamuni Buddha, which some of you do in your daily practices. Okay, I'm going to share my screen as well. Okay, can you see that? Okay. Here's the Buddha. So we're pretty familiar. Most of us are pretty familiar with the Buddha. We get a sense he's really a radiant golden being, and mostly you basically you want to have everything as much not in a solid form but in the nature of light. Not in a solid form. Okay, it's nature of light. And you want to imagine him in the space in front of you, a few feet in front. We're just going to do this briefly till the lunch break, and we're going to do this again as well. And he's slightly higher than the level of your forehead. What we're not seeing here is he's on a golden throne made of jewels, supported by snow lions. So there's 2 lions on each corner that represent his fearlessness. And if you have the Shakyamuni Buddha practice booklet, that will give you some descriptions of what each of the symbols in the visualization are about. Like for instance, his lips are technically red. I'm not sure if, yeah, they're slightly red, you can see, which represents that he teaches out of compassion, like that. There's actually 3 little lines under his neck that is a sign of enlightenment. The Ushnisha here, this is a crown protrusion on top of the top knot, is another sign of Buddhahood, of omniscience. He's seated on a sun, on first of all, the lotus here, see the multicolored lotus, that represents renunciation, okay? And then technically there's a sun and a moon disk, which is hard to see here. It looks like one cushion, but you could see there's a little light here, and that's kind of the sun disk, and then he's on this moon cushion, okay? That represents, the moon is bodhicitta, relative bodhicitta, this wish to get enlightened to benefit all living beings, that opening of the heart. The sun disk is emptiness. The sun illuminates everything to see the lack of inherent nature, that everything arises in dependence on other things. It's the only way they can be or exist. Those are his 3 foundations. Again, renunciation, bodhicitta, and emptiness. That's the symbolism of the lotus, sun, and moon discs. So everything in Tibetan Buddhism is very symbolic, a lot of bells and whistles, and a lot of colors. He's draped in the beautiful robes. He's holding a bowl filled with nectar. And you see here, the right arm is in what's called the earth touching mudra, where the middle finger of the right hand is touching the moon cushion. It's technically called earth touching. And this was his moment of enlightenment, where sitting under the Bodhi tree, they don't quite have the Bodhi, well, this is kind of a representative of the Bodhi tree, which doesn't really have, they're more like lotuses. Bodhi tree doesn't really have flowers like that. But basically symbolic, when the last Maras came to distract him, desire, 3 poisons, everything, there were enemies coming and shooting arrows, and he just immediately from his concentration turned the arrows into roses that dropped at his feet. And then the last desirable goddesses came to try to, entice him. And they said, why do you need to get enlightened? And then he touched that moon cushion, earth touching mudra, to kind of say, the earth was my witness of all the past lives. I made effort to subdue my mind, not only the gross obscurations, but right now the most subtle. And then he became enlightened like that. And with incredible effort, incredible discipline, when he went to sit under the Bodhi tree with the gross delusions of his obscurations removed, meaning gross anger, gross desire, gross ignorance, all those gross delusions, he still had, what's left are the subtle obscurations. And he said, I'm not moving until the subtle veils of obscurations are removed. And in that earth touching mudra became Buddha, fully awakened being, enlightened one. And so imagine him slightly higher than the level of your forehead. Facing you, he's about 6 inches in height, as if he's really there in front of you. Just take a moment to set that as best as you can. And yourself in a good posture. With the spine erect, we're keeping a nice open flow of those subtle channels in the body, keeping them nice and opened as much as possible. And what we need to do is keep those channels open and supple, which is what all the purification practices and all the accumulation of merit does for our mind. We may not really feel that, but it's really happening in our mind. Absolutely. Now, I just want to point to you, if you look at the document right now, the 6 preparatory practices, and then we're going to continue this practice after lunch. But I just want you to get a sense of, how should I start doing practices? Some of you are already doing this. This is, again, something that sets you up for tantric practice. And even before that, it sets you up to be able to actualize the 3 principal aspects of the path. Okay? This is in all the Lama books, the 6 preparatory practices. What do we mean by this? Okay? Well, you want to have a nice space. So there's an actual sweeping and cleaning the room and arranging the altar. Okay? They actually say sweep the room with a broom because it has more of an effect on the mind than a vacuum. But you want to try to have a clean, I have a table with my bowls, and I make sure the table's clean. I give it a wipe in the morning. Even if it's not that dirty, it's just kind of a thing for my mind. It's cleaning the mind. Each thing you want to do with mindfulness. I make sure my water bowls are clean every morning and that the water's clean. And you arrange the altar, and I set up my water bowls. I set up any food offerings I might have, any flowers. I might turn the lights on if there's electric lights around, or light a candle, but everything in a nice, clean way. So as soon as the fruit or the food goes off, I take it off the altar. As soon as the flowers start to wilt, remove them from the altar, replace them, or just take them off the altar. So it's getting your mind in this habit of, this is a special time. And when I mentioned about not eating or drinking during a teaching, I'm not picking on anybody at all, because we all do it. But I just noticed, for instance, when I've come to teachings online, and I kind of came with, I'm gonna have my lunch right now during the teaching, I just noticed it wasn't the right way to really show up at the teaching. So you want to make sure that the other activities are done so I can get the most out of this time, that I'm really actively listening and paying attention and giving it my undivided attention. And why? Because the teachings are kind of precious. From ancient days, You would spend years, putting together your most precious jewel and take that to somebody finally to get one teaching. Now the teachings are happening all day long on Zoom. And we sit there and we lie in bed while they're teaching and we, things like that. So again, it starts creating that sloppiness in the mind. I've noticed that for myself. Yeah, I notice watching teachings with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, if I want to watch them live, they are they're 11 at night and they go sometimes to 1 in the morning and it's very late for me. So, but what I did notice in the beginning is I'd be dressed with my ceremonial robe. I'd make 3 prostrations, and I was much better able to stay awake and kind of really there than lying in bed in my pajamas. Like then I'd easily go to sleep, so again, you're doing the best you can. And all these teachings are recorded, so you can always watch at a better time if it works, but it's nice to get some things when it's happening live. With His Holiness, you're getting that transmission live like that if you're really paying attention. Number 2, preparatory practice, making the offerings it mentions and knowing how to set up water bowls and things. There's another practice booklet for that. Number 3, sit in your posture. Check your mind for a moment. Before you launch into practice, we need to get ourselves ready. That's why we started today with relaxation, like let go of the tension in the body. A little bit of breathing meditation. Let me check my posture. Because if you're slouched, if I'm leaning heavily against a wall or something, my back's not so much supporting that open, spacious place for the channels, okay? If I've got so much distraction, that breathing meditation we did in the beginning, that first part of that meditation, set your motivation, okay? And then the basic refuge and bodhicitta prayers, whatever you want to do, or anything that puts your mind in that space, but that's just a general traditional way, step number 3, okay? Number 4, visualize the merit field. A lot of people miss this step. And they talk about this more elaborately in Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand. Okay, the almost first volume goes through a very elaborate visualization, but basically I've just asked you, have the Buddha in the space in front of you. Good enough in the beginning. When you get a little bit more detailed and you're practicing Lama Chopa, like that, we're going to talk about that later. Once again, I'm going to add some notes to that. You're going to have a little bit more elaborate field. And I put all my individual personal teachers right in there. I have them included as well, with their different positions where they are over time. Now, because I'm doing it so often, doing it every day, they just pop in there. Now it's all there, okay? And then I can leave it out there all day long. So I'm having a drink, I offer it first to them. And when I do that, if I do it with the right motivation, I'm accumulating some merit, some good. I'm having a meal, I'm offering first to them, okay? So I'm gonna leave Shakyamuni Buddha out there for you if you're taking a lunch break, and you can first think about him and just think about offering to him. And if you want, say Om Ah Hong 3 times. Om Ah Hong. Say it 3 times. Blessing with the body, speech, and mind of the Buddha. So Om, white nectar rays coming from his forehead. Ah, red nectar rays coming from his throat. Blue nectar rays coming from his heart into your food, blessing your food. Empty in nature, but first you kind of make that offering to him, then you can eat. When you take Tantric empowerment, you have a commitment before you eat anything, drink anything, to bless it with Om Ah Hong 3 times before you do it. If that's you getting into that practice. Okay, so you visualize the merit field, visualize Shakyamuni Buddha alone. If you have a particular teacher or guru, imagine he's inseparable. Shakyamuni Buddha is inseparable from your guru and is the embodiment of all the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha. Like that. Step number 5, which is what we did at the beginning of these teachings, is we offered a mandala, and we're going to be doing a 7-limb prayer when we come back with this practice. And it's a very profound prayer that includes a lot of practices like that. And number 6 is a step we often forget, is to make requests. And all of these are included in the Lama Chopa practice, which is why it's such a nice complete practice. Also included in the Lama Tsongkhapa Guru Yoga, just a different Guru Yoga practice. What we're getting used to with Tantric practice is something called Guru Yoga. Guru Yoga. Guru is your teacher, and seeing your teacher is inseparable from the Buddha, seeing them inseparable from any aspect of a deity, of the omniscient mind. All of them are one in you, like that ultimately with Tantric practice. I'm going to stop this share for a moment. Okay, we're going to take a break right now for lunch, and I'd like to dedicate whatever merit we may have created from this morning's session. And I just wanted to set you up in that one session with these preliminaries, and then we're going to do some more practice this afternoon and get further into, start to get into Tantra. I'd like to dedicate whatever positivity, any positive deeds we've created, any merit, I'd like to dedicate it to us really being able to keep our mindfulness during the break as much as possible. We've got a few things to work with. Shakyamuni Buddha is still out there, that's fine. And may it help us create deep seeds of virtue in our mind that will help us be able to practice Tantra well, if that's something we're interested in one day, to move us along the path to enlightenment quickly so we can be of the most benefit to all living beings. Thank you so much. And we begin again at 2 p.m. Enjoy your break. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.